Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're catching up with the FIA race. This is the manufacturer series at Redbull Ring in Group 3. So you can see already there, starting from P3 myself. This race was a bit of a weird one. Again, we had a bit of a situation on this day with disconnections in FIA races. So in this race there was only 16 people in the race. I think 3 got disconnected, and then because the points were so low after that, another person decided to leave, which meant, I think, for first place in a top split race, the points were about 2.4 to 2.5k, which, as you can understand, is a little bit disappointing in a race that means quite a lot. And I felt very sorry for certain people in this race, in particular Carl Williams, who had already picked up 2.7k points and was looking for the win because he had very good pace. And unfortunately for him, now he can only get 2.5k points because of the situation with Gran Turismo's disconnections during this season. It is becoming a little bit too often. They did get on top of this, and it just seems for some reason they've come back into the game, these disconnections. It's not great to see, but we managed to qualify P3 in this race with an okay qualifying. We did a 29.6. It wasn't a perfect lap. We had done better in practice sessions the day before, etc. But you can see, getting to the back end of the grid now, you're going to see how we're missing 4 cars from the back of the grid, which is not good to see. We want the full 20 cars in these grids, and we want the points to be how they should be. One thing I think that should happen is, no matter how many disconnects happen, the points should stay the same. It should just leave them people that disconnected in the final positions of the race, because they don't get points anyway. So I don't see what harm it would do just to put them in the bottom places, because the situation in this race was, this was worth less than a split free race, which is not really fair when you've got the best drivers in Europe racing in a race, to give them the same points as split free drivers, etc. But we decided to carry on with the race, starting from P3. Not really worried about the points in this race, because we can't do any sort of points that are going to mean anything. You can see there, drivers in front trying to warm their tyres up a bit, going into turn 1, trying to clip that curb, the yellow curb. You really want to try and cut it a bit, and just be careful not to run too far wide. Now, one thing about this track is the penalties were so random. One lap you could run further out wide and not get a penalty. The next lap you'd keep it fairly, a little bit wide. You'd run like half the car out and you pick up a penalty. So really strange, as you see, going into technically turn 3 there. Garassa manages to get himself in the lead as Devil makes a mistake going into the braking zone, goes far too deep in, probably where the tyres are not warmed up yet. I did that a few times in the practice session, found it very difficult to stop the car on that point of the track on lap 1, and also obviously cold tyres and everything just not set up to temperature on the car as it goes into the braking zone, and you just have no grip. So Devil caught out by that. Garassa takes advantage very nicely, puts himself up into P1. We've got Carl Williams right behind me, and he's obviously my teammate for esports and cars. I'm not going to battle him too hard, although I still want to try and get as good a result as possible. As we come to the end of lap 1, you see, just trying to stay in the slipstream of Devil there in front of us in P2, while Carl Williams obviously also in the slipstream right behind us, putting us under some pressure as we go into the final corners. Missing the apex by quite a big margin there. Didn't quite hook that up. Gave Carl Williams quite a nice run there, getting very close to our slipstream. However, managed to get quite a good exit on the final corner, giving us that slipstream back going down the main straight. Obviously this race, I think the slipstream was still at the 7/10 range, because this was before the update that changed the slipstream. So anything over like 8/10 you wouldn't be picking up the slipstream, as we go a little bit wide, but following the exact same line as Devil there in front of us. However, we suddenly get a penalty for that, but Devil doesn't. I actually went back and watched that, and the lines myself and Devil took were pretty much identical, but he got away without a penalty, and I was a bit unlucky to pick the penalty up. I think even Carl Williams behind us took a very similar line, but it was a risk that we took. We ran a little bit wide through the corner, and we get half a second penalty, which is going to drop myself right behind Carl Williams. We took inside the slipstream, and you see there the Citroen behind us decides to bump draft us down the straight instead of going for the overtake. I think he decided it would have been a better option to get myself back into the slipstream with Carl Williams, rather than us both losing the slipstream to the lead battle. So quite sensible driving there by P5, thinking about the long run in the race. Decided not to battle for that position, because obviously the Citroen is not the fastest car down the straight, so he's probably been thinking if he can just stay in the slipstream, it will help his race pace all the way to the end, as we now go through to complete the end of lap 2 now. And that was a bit frustrating for me to get that penalty, because it did drop us back. We were obviously in the slipstream of Devil at that point, and one thing about the Toyota Supra was it wasn't the best car for tyre wear. Although the Ford wasn't the best either. I think the Ford was actually a little bit more controllable than the Toyota Supra in terms of like lap 6, 7, 8, 9 onwards. It's starting to struggle a bit, that Toyota, so a bit frustrating that we've now lost that slipstream, but we're going to try and get back into it and keep the pace up to see if we can just creep back into the slipstream. You see, running a little bit wide there, but one thing we did that time was we brought the car straight back into the track limits very aggressively to try and avoid picking up a penalty, and we actually didn't pick it up then. But again, comparing that to Devil, when we got our penalty, we actually brought the car back onto the track quicker than Devil did. But for some reason, Devil didn't pick up the penalty, but we did. And we did actually notice when we were following Devil throughout the race that there was a strange thing where he was able to run quite far wide. There is a certain line you can take on that turn 1, which stops you getting a penalty. I don't know how to do it 100%, and I just tend to run it a little bit wide, trying to get like 2 tyres over the white line and try and keep some of the car on, obviously. But it's just a case of trying to work that out. Some people know how to do it, some people don't. I would like them to fix that limit so that basically you have to keep at least 2 wheels on the racetrack. As long as 2 wheels are on the racetrack, I think it'd be okay. Anything more than obviously 2 wheels over the white line, it should be a penalty, and then that would stop any advantage for anyone. Everyone would have to take that corner how it should be taken. So maybe if Polyphony are listening, that is what I think needs to happen for turn 1. Let's fix the limits on that turn 1. I did notice with other cars as well, when I think we had a road race here, that some cars were able to run all the way to the wall and not get a penalty. So that issue is still present on this track, which is a shame, as we managed to go over the line there with a purple lap there, so the fastest lap of the race so far, and we didn't actually have a slipstream really. We were quite far back, you can see, just not really in it. So the pace is there. We're getting back into the slipstream now on the main straight now, picking up Carl Williams' slipstream in that Mercedes just about, you can see. So close to not having it, but luckily for ourselves, we're just in range to pick it up into turn 3 and trying to get on the power as nicely as possible here, just squeezing that throttle down. Very hard corner for the Ford because you couldn't take it in second gear because second gear's ratio was too high, but first gear spun the wheels up quite aggressively, so you just kind of had to risk it a bit and just feed that throttle in first gear just to get the power down, as you see going through that corner there. And you can see Carl Williams is starting to put Devil on the pressure, so this is actually quite good for me because if they start battling, it should give me the opportunity to get back into the slipstream and put some pressure on P2 or P3, whatever position would be. You know, opportunities can arise in situations like this. As we go through that sector again with a purple time, now that we've got the slipstream, we're going to be picking up obviously faster sectors and picking the slipstream up down this straight just about, I think, there into the final few corners. Again, very tricky corners these when you're in the draft though of another car. The car tends to understeer and become a little bit loose on the rear as we go through the final corner, trying to stay with this lead group. You can see very difficult. You can see Grasser at the front managing to pull out quite a nice lead there. He's got himself, I think, out the slipstream range of Devil. Only just though, it looks like it's very close to being in the slipstream. It's just managing maybe 9/10 to a second outside the range from picking up that draft as we go down to start another lap now. So very close racing at the moment. We've got a bit of a gap now between P5 and myself, which is nice. It means we don't have to go defensive into any of these braking zones. And again, we managed to go through that sector with a purple time, and we're putting reasonable good times up at the moment. Now the Ford was very competitive, I think, on the early phase of the race, but then on the last few laps it did struggle compared to, for example, the Mercedes, which Mercedes is very good on tyre wear, so that's when the Ford tended to lose a little bit of time compared to the Mercedes. However, the Ford was probably a little bit stronger, I would say, on the early laps. I mean, I haven't driven the Mercedes here to know for sure. I do like driving the Mercedes. Obviously, we did use it in previous seasons, but I tend to change my car around every single change of season just for a bit of variety as we now go through these really fast flowing corners. And you have to be so careful on that curb there because, as you see there, Carl Williams looks like his car nearly bottomed out on that curb a bit then and nearly lost control. That is one thing that can happen on that curb. It's a very tricky corner that can catch you out very easily as we go through the final corner, trying to swing it in here. You can see I'm just trying to stay and get into the slipstream range to help my speed down the straight. You can see we're just outside the draft zone at the moment, which is a bit frustrating. But one thing, the Ford seemed quite strong through turn 1. If I could obviously hook the car up through here, you see getting the line pretty much sorted there and actually doing it very nicely, just about in the draft zone. But again, we're going to probably lose it by the end of the main straight where Carl Williams is very close to Devil. But is he going to go for a move this lap? It looks like he might be going for a move. You can see he's going down the right side. He's going to try and go for that move. And this is good for me because it's going to get me very close to Devil now. I'm back in the slipstream range going down into turn 4. So you can see there, we're back in the slipstream range now because of that move. And now we've got to try and see if we can hang in on the slipstream and put Devil under some pressure hopefully in this race, because like I say, the Ford was a bit stronger and I really wanted to get a podium. Even though the points were not particularly great, I wanted to try and get a podium in this race, just for the sake of getting a podium. There was no point benefit because the points were so low because of the disconnections. But we're going to try and put Devil under as much pressure as possible. We've got a bit of a gap to is it Magic Alonso behind us in the Citroen, so we're fairly comfortable there. So we're going to go and give it our all because we got nothing to lose basically. The points are not worth it for the win anyway, so we may as well push on and see what we can get out of this race as we go through the final corners. You can see that Toyota in front of me is starting to struggle a bit with the grip. You can see it looks very sketchy through the corners, and that is one thing I noticed when I think we had a practice race with TRL Manuel Rodri, and the same thing was very evident there, that his car was towards the end of the stints, like after lap 6, was getting a little bit sketchy and a little bit loose on the rear and looked a lot more difficult to drive than the Ford for the final few laps. However, again, I've managed to pick up another penalty, and again, I'm actually going to show you this now. Let's take a look at what actually happened there. So let's take a look here as we go into the corner. We hit this apex pretty much perfect there, and then we run a little bit wide, but we actually bring the car back onto the track sooner and don't run as wide as Devil. It looks like we take pretty much a similar line, but then we get the car back on track a lot sooner than Devil. But I pick up half a second penalty, he doesn't get a penalty. So very, very strange. Not quite sure why that's happened, but it is what it is, and we end up with another half second penalty, which is going to drop me outside that slipstream range, which is really frustrating. And it's also going to bring P5 back into my slipstream, which is a bit frustrating because that car is probably a bit better on tyres than the Ford GT. However, it's probably going to lack the straight line speed to be able to go for an overtake. So I've got to do all that work again in terms of trying to get back close to Devil's slipstream and see if we can go for a move. We've only got, well, 3 more laps to go after completing this lap to try and make it happen. Obviously, these races are very short as usual with FIA. I really hope that they change their settings for these races. I think that this race needed to be a minimum of 15 laps long and with slightly different settings to encourage either a no stop or a one stop. I would like settings that were, say, 20 laps long, making the race maybe 17 to 18 laps long would have been nice, making the distance around 25 to 30 minutes in terms of total distance, and then obviously just making the settings so that you could pit within a nice range. This is what we've talked about a lot in other races as well, just giving ourselves a nice range. As you see there, we run much further wide that time than we did on the previous lap, but this time we don't get a penalty. This is the real strange thing about the penalty system at Redbull Ring. It is so random, you just don't know when you're going to get it or not, but this time we're lucky we don't pick up a penalty as we go through the final corner, turn 2, or technically turn 3, and you can see we're getting close to picking that slipstream back up from Devil. Obviously Devil hasn't got a slipstream to defend now, so we've got the motivation to push on and see if we can get back into that podium position, because the Ford is a bit faster on terms of top speed, although the Supra is also a very fast car. However, he seems to be having a little bit of difficulty in terms of traction, although the Ford is also starting to get a bit twitchy. You can see with the tyre wear, the rears are starting to wear out a little bit, but you can see my brake bias. We always do this when we come to race settings. We go all the way to the front with the Ford GT to look after them rear tyres as much as possible. It does help out. It does create a lot more traction at the rear towards the end of the races, especially for these races where it's a no-stop race. It's all about a sprint race. And now we're 1.1 seconds behind the Devil. Am I gonna be able to get back into that slipstream? I was fairly confident I'd be able to get into the slipstream, but being able to make a move is another thing. Primarily because the Ford GT on the brakes isn't the strongest car. However, we're going to push and see if we can get something out of this race. I mean, a P4 wouldn't be a bad result in this race, but I wanted to try and get myself into that P3 as we go again into that very risky turn 1, trying to make sure we don't get a penalty, and again running even further out wide than we did on the previous laps, but again not picking up a penalty. So it is really random. It's not even how much we took off the apex of the corner when we got that penalty, because we've done other laps where I think our qualifying lap we completely cut that corner off and ran quite far wide out and didn't get a penalty, as Devil there runs quite far wide, and that's actually going to give him good traction. However, it's given me the ability to get into that slipstream just slightly. So now we've got that draft down this straight into the heavy braking zone, and we've got 1.5 laps to go. Will I be able to make a move somewhere? As you can see, Grasser looks like he's struggling. Looks like he picked up a penalty also, and obviously starting to struggle a bit with them tyres as well on these final few laps. It's one thing that obviously the Ford, the Supra, did start to struggle a little bit, especially compared to the Mercedes. Mercedes a much stronger car in terms of race pace over the full race distance. That's why it's one of the, I've said it 100 times, it's one of the top 4 or 5 cars, I would say, the Mercedes, in terms of race pace. Qualifying, it's not always the best car, but it's definitely in race trim, it's one of the better cars. Very easy car to drive and very good on tyre wear as we go through the final corners. Trying to stay close to that slipstream, but you can see how tricky both my car and Devil's car is becoming to look. You can see he's having trouble on that final corner. I'm having trouble putting the power down, and now we start the final lap, but we have the slipstream. Will I be able to get close enough through this turn 1? I'm going to have to go for it, risk getting a penalty or not, because there's nothing to lose as we run quite a nice line that time, not running wide, and that has actually given me a very nice exit speed from the corner. You can see we're gaining down the straight, we're going to rev the car out, but again, not able to get into a position to make a move here, because obviously the Ford has not got very good brakes, so it'd be suicidal to try and make a move into that corner there. But Devil again running very far wide, really struggling to get his car turned in there and get the line sorted. But now, will I be able to make a move into this turn 4? It getting very close to that slipstream. I'm going to have a little look down the right, but you can see it's so risky with these tyres the way they are. I just cannot brake late enough in this Ford, and Devil's managed to hold on to that position through there. But we're going to keep putting him under pressure. You never know, someone could make a mistake on these final few corners. Very tricky corners, these last few, when your tyres are running low with tyre wear. You can see Devil's car almost snaking around with the lack of grip. You can see he's really struggling, and my car also really is becoming very twitchy and difficult to drive. However, we're going to keep putting the power down as we have a massive moment there, nearly losing it on the curb and nearly losing the race completely, but just about managed to hold on. And now into the final few corners, is Devil going to buckle on the pressure, or is he just going to maintain the speed all the way through these final corners? He does that one very nicely into this final corner, and you can see he's actually going to go over the line in P3 in this race. So well done by Devil there, maintaining the speed all the way to the end. So I end up coming away with a fairly respectable P4, especially when you see the drivers that are in the lobby. It was obviously a fast lobby, very high rated lobby. However, because of the point situation and the fact that we had disconnects, I'm pretty sure we came away with only, I think it was 2.1k points, which is not great if I'm brutally honest. You know, for a P4 in top split, I think you should be getting around 2.4 minimum really. But unfortunately, that is what happens when you have disconnects on Gran Turismo. The whole point situation changes. And we did a hard-fought race for 2.1k points, so it is what it is. Again, hopefully we can get these point situations sorted in the future. I'm sure Polyphony are looking at it. I'm sure they're thinking of ways to fix the point situation for situations like this. I really hope that we get some experimental settings in the next official season, once this season's finished, after obviously the World Tour events, because I think it's what we need. We need to see some showing that Gran Turismo are looking at changing these settings around and looking into the disconnect issues and also the point situation. But anyway, hope you enjoyed that race. Wanted to catch up with some of these races. We've still got a lot of races to catch up on from FIA, so we'll be continuing to do that along with streams as much as possible. I hope to see you all very soon for another stream and video. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. I do appreciate everyone that hits that thumbs up button, and I'll see you very soon for another video. Thanks again for watching, everyone.